People need to start to do research because generative AI is so confident when it's wrong. 2 years ago, I spoke at Config. When I was prepping for the talk, I was using ChatGPT to talk about Garrett Morgan. Garrett Morgan invented our modern day stoplight, the red, yellow, green. And I asked ChatGPT to create an image of Garrett Morgan. And when it created an image, it was of a white person. Garrett Morgan was black.
There is a thing on the startup world where we say accessibility and inclusivity is an afterthought because we don't even know that we're going to survive in the first place.
To me, whenever anyone said making something accessible is too much, do you know how much money you are leaving behind? Billions. I know some folks who are building stuff in Lovable, for example, and they put it out there in the world. But the thing about Lovable is it's not necessarily the most accessible when it comes to like making things accessible for people with disabilities. So you assume because you put this design in whatever tool, right, that the output is going to be something that's useful. That's to me a huge assumption. What the rhetoric is that AI is coming for you, it's coming for your job. But the entity that's coming for you and coming for your job can never admit it's wrong, is confident when it's wrong. That's what's coming for you.
Hello everyone, my name is Guidione Machava and welcome for the first episode of the World Class Design Podcast. Actually, it's been a while since I've recorded. I think the last episode I did was audio only and was a couple of years ago, and decided to take the opportunity to do this summer, different from the physical events that we've been organizing. So for my guest today is Regine, and she's a professional designer, but I'll let her introduce herself. But first of all, thanks for accepting this invite and being the first guest for this episode.
Yeah, thank you for having me. So hi, everybody. I am Regine Gilbert. I do systems and change strategy as well as digital design. I am a professor at New York University where I teach many things, but I primarily have taught user experience design as well as assistive technologies with a focus on inclusive design. I am an author of 4 books, one translated into Japanese. So I have my first book came out in 2019, Inclusive Design for a Digital World, the first edition. My second book was Human Spatial Computing. My third book was the second edition of my inclusive design book. And then I did a collaboration with 38 other people where I was an editor and an author of a digital accessibility ethics book. So I've been busy, and I also contributed to a book on critical design that's just come out through MIT Press. So I've been very busy over the last 5 years in terms of my output around books and authorship.
That's impressive. I think that's even becomes a little bit more relevant today, not only because of AI, but because design is being seen as a economic force that in a way influentiate how people behave. So I have a practical example. I remember learning about in social media companies being fined because of bad practices that create addictive patterns that make people hooked and end up spending too many hours using the tool. That sounds like naivety from the designer's perspective when they're building, because they're trying to improve retention, trying to make the users keep using the product, but there is a broader scope on that action itself. And I think your work in a way comes there too, isn't it?
Yeah, when it comes to deceptive patterns, those are by design, right? Those things that when you're trying to unsubscribe from something and you can't figure it out, that is by design. All these things that happen in design are by design. And a lot of times when designers are working on things, and I know in my past work, for example, when it came to subscriptions, where I had to put buttons in certain places where I didn't want to put it there, but I was told by the higher ups, you need to put things in places so people will click on that. So there are situations designers get put into where they have to make decisions that are not their own.
I see. So, and how does that make you feel?
Not great. No one wants, I won't say no one. When you respect your work, appreciate your work as the designer, you want to do the most ethical things you can. But when you are being told to do something that goes against what you have to do, it does create friction. And then you have to make a decision. Do I stay in this role or do I find something else that's more fitting for me? So
Yeah.
that's what ultimately you have to do. And there have been instances in my past where I said, there's things that I've done with my work where I go, oh,
I see.
that eliminated a job. Ooh, that made people click on that thing more,
Mm,
right? In my past work. And it was just part of my work. But that's sometimes the things that you have to do when you work.
because yeah,
You have to
yeah,
pay your bills.
yeah, I understand. Yeah, it's a tricky situation. Changing topics, let's talk about AI. Our conversation today is about when the AI becomes the designer, what type of decisions are embedded there, and what becomes the AI responsibility and what becomes the designer's responsibility. Can you deconstruct what is your opinion and what is your positioning on that?
Yeah. So thinking about this topic, I get the pleasure of advising and teaching the next generation of designers, and I have for over 10 years. And I've always had to pay attention to what's next,
Where are you
right?
teaching right now?
I teach user experience design, product design,
Yeah.
and assistive technology. For example, this past semester, I taught agile product design. And in that course, I had the students think about the systems with which they work, right? And I gave an analogy of systems from a systems thinking perspective where you're on the dance floor, you're on the balcony, and I added one where you're looking from the outside. So right now, if we think about designers from this kind of systems perspective, we're all on the dance floor.
Oh, I see.
We are all on the dance floor trying to figure out who's the DJ. They just messed up. That didn't make me wanna
Mhm.
move. When you think about who's looking at the dance floor from a balcony perspective, it's the managers, right?
Okay.
It's the hiring people, right? And who's looking from the outside, it could be your users, it could be this. So when it comes to AI, what I see is ultimate confusion as to how are we using it? What are we using it for? What is the purpose? And I have a former student of mine who said, we are being forced to use AI at my job
Okay.
every day, even if we don't want to. And it makes me pause and question, like, what is management doing here? But going back to the question of the decision making, right? A lot of the decision making is not actually in the designer's hands. What the designer needs to do is get their work done, and nowadays is get their work done faster. So when you hear people talk about AI, all you hear about is the speed. But what we're missing in getting things out faster is, to me, the user experience. And what we are missing is stopping and pausing long enough to question, is this what the user really needs? Is this actually providing value to us as a business, to the user? And we're just told to move faster and faster.
Okay.
Right? So that's what I've been seeing.
Okay. I think that's interesting. So one of the things that we spoke about was a bias on the AI output. How do we see those? There is anything we can do to prevent, first of all, to identify those and to prevent that to dictate how we as designers do our jobs.
Yeah. So when people are using generative AI for their, let's say you're using it for user personas, there's in whether you're using Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever it is you're using, I'm not sure, there is a built-in bias there. There are certain cultures that are not included. From my own research and from my own writing with my book, I call AI the missing ramp.
Okay.
Because when you think about a building, a lot of buildings are not meant for people with disabilities to get in them,
Okay.
or even somebody with a baby and have a stroller. Is there a ramp for them to get in there? So when you are working with Gen AI and you're using it to prompt, I think designers need to make their prompts a lot more clear and understand that there is bias built in. So when you're asking for user personas, those user personas should be a lot more specific. So you should ask if someone has no use of hands
Mm,
or if someone cannot hear, how might this experience be for them?
mm,
Right? Those are just some examples of what you can do when you're thinking about making something more inclusive. So, for example, just from Mozambique, right? There are certain things that are cultural specific to Mozambique that I am sure are not in ChatGPT.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, when thinking about who you are building a product for, are you actually thinking about those people? Because I can almost guarantee you that Gen AI that you're using is not, right?
Mhm.
Especially when you're thinking about things on a global scale. I think about even with copy, for example. So I used to work in e-commerce. And when we would work on copy, the copy team loved to write these beautiful long sentences. And we're like, this is great. But when this gets translated into German, it will cover up all of
Mm.
the imagery.
Okay, I see, I see. We used to have those problems like at Shopify, you know.
So these are the things that maybe Gen AI is not thinking about, right? These are lived experience things that people have. So when you're prompting these things, you can what I've seen is like junior designers who are using Gen AI to help them with their designs. The designs come out okay. And because they're junior and they don't fully know the user experience process. Whereas somebody who is a lot more senior can put in very specific things.
I see.
And those specific things that they put in can give a different output than a junior person
I
would.
would.
Exactly if they were designing side by side. If you had a
Mhm.
junior designer and a senior designer, the senior designer likely will have different perspectives of seeing things than the junior.
I see. That's interesting. What about the data set? Because the layer of AI is the data that was trained on.
Yes.
So there is any way, any measures that the designers can take, or any assumptions that they should have made to prepare themselves before taking action. I've been like playing around with AI myself
Yeah.
and training data, like with law, for example. So if you go to ChatGPT or Perplexity and ask about law, you're gonna realize that it's more actual on specific countries about US, what changed, what got updated, and the
Right.
likelihood of it to get wrong on those topics is gonna be very low. As per if you research about the same content about Mozambique, the output, although it's gonna sound extremely confident because the
Yes.
ways the AI answer was trained to be sound always right, even
Yes.
though sometimes it's not. But most of the answers end up realizing that they were wrong because not because the AI want intention to make it wrong, but the training data that they have doesn't take into account like specific nuances. So example, if now I'm building a product like a global product like for US or France that will later on scale to other places, I know exactly what to do. And because I've also been playing around and I've learned the limitations about Mozambique, I know what to do to be able to make it country specific on all those gaps that I'm 100% aware that exist, and
Right.
what I can do as a designer to make sure that they don't show up on the product at the end. So I wonder if there is any tips that you could give for other designers to be able to take before even starting doing the job, saying, okay, based on the assumptions of that the training data is incomplete or carries bias, those are the things you need to do. What are those?
You just gave them all. So you just answered your own question, actually, because what you said is you are starting to build your own data sets.
Yeah.
You already see the gaps that exist in the existing systems, and you're therefore filling in those gaps by researching and looking for the knowledge yourself.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's easier for me because I know the reality. But how do you behave when you don't know? Because we usually use those tools in not so naive way, but being naive at the same time as
Yeah.
the source of knowledge. So if I'm researching about Japan, I'm gonna assume that ChatGPT knows everything. So
Yeah.
I will assume that the answer that's gonna give me is correct
Yeah.
because I'm too lazy to go check in the actual book.
Okay.
Like, how do you prevent? What are the things as you building your case? What are the things you need to know or you need to do to make sure that how do you double check that answer?
The first thing I'll say is don't assume,
Okay.
because if you assume, you will likely be wrong. right?
Mm.
Secondly, I would say to think about who you are leaving out from your initial idea. And is the system, when you're prompting the system, know that you have your own bias that you're coming with. It has its own bias. So, how do you fill in those gaps? And then I would say people need to start to do research because generative AI is so confident when it's wrong. I wish I had that confidence.
Okay.
I
They all
really
wish.
do. I was like, I want the confidence of ChatGPT when it's wrong. I've even said I want your confidence when you're wrong, and it's thank you. So if you have, I think about it in this way, if you have a friend that never admits they're wrong, are you going to stay friends with them? Probably not, right?
Yeah.
So when you're dealing with this Gen AI system that will honestly won't tell you I'm wrong. It
Mm.
won't say it.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
It'll only say it after you've said, hey, that's not right. And I did 2 years ago, I spoke at Config. Before, when I was prepping for the talk, I was using ChatGPT to talk about Garrett Morgan. Garrett Morgan invented our modern day, what people know as a stoplight, the red, yellow, green,
Okay,
right?
okay.
And I asked ChatGPT to create an image of Garrett Morgan. And when it created an image, it was of a white person.
Mm.
Garrett Morgan was Black.
Okay.
Okay. But ChatGPT was so confident in that. And I put that on the big stage at Config that this happened, that this was wrong. And to me, it was a great example for designers to, you always have to check. You're not going to me as a designer, you have to always check your designs with another designer. To me, design is a conversation. So even when I was freelance designing, I would have some other freelance designers look at my work before I gave it to the client.
I see.
So when you are working on stuff, always check it.
Check, yeah.
Always. There's no reason not to. We all know someone who is willing to look at work, especially as designers. People
You know,
love to give
critique.
feedback.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
we
yeah.
don't mind critiquing. So that's my advice there.
Okay. I do have a question. I wrote one non-specific question. Actually, I wrote it down so I make sure that I frame it correctly. So unpack for me with this. It used to be the designer's choice. Now is the system's assumptions. What actually changed?
So people's workflow has changed completely, right? When we think about a designer's workflow. For me, I used to hand sketch things before I would put them into, I used to use Sketch back in the
Mm.
day, right? And then we all switched to Figma for the most part. So nowadays, because things are moving so much faster, the hand sketch piece is out, the thinking it through is out, and you're immediately building out a prototype, right? So you might be, I know some folks who are building stuff like in Lovable, for example, and they put it out there in the world. But the thing about Lovable is it's not necessarily the most accessible when it comes to making things accessible for people with disabilities. So you assume because you put this design in whatever tool,
Mhm.
right, that the output is going to be something that's useful. That's to me a huge assumption. But again, when we think about someone who is using assistive technologies, for example, they're using a screen reader. How screen reader friendly are some of these AI outputs that we're putting? We don't know. Oftentimes, we don't know. When we think about things that are getting translated into other languages, is it really going to work? We don't know. We're assuming that it's going to work because of what we see. So again, everybody's workflow is different.
Different. Yep.
I think that there needs to be a moment of pause to question, what are we doing here? What value are we bringing here? Because I think a lot, I think as designers being forced to push stuff out as quickly as possible, but then having to do rework
Like,
later on because we didn't stop to ask those questions.
yeah. But do you think we're talking about posing? Is that realistic though on today's age where every
No,
single morning we have a new feature, we
no,
have
it's
a
not
new model?
realistic. But no, to answer your question, no, it's not realistic. But the reality of us doing rework is the rework that people end up doing over and over because they didn't pause
Mhm,
is real. So it's, do you want to take the time in the beginning of something? And in my past life, I used to be an information technology project manager, right? And at the beginning of a project, before it started, we as a team would sit and go, what are the risks here? Right. And in UX, I taught for many years of pre-mortem. What could go wrong? And I think if a designer could take half an hour and go, what could go wrong with this project? You literally can take half an hour
mhm.
and say, what could go wrong here? And list those things out. And then list how you would mitigate those things, right? How could I fix these things that could go wrong? Then you could hop into the project. So that's one way of approaching it without taking so much time.
Okay, I understand. That's a very hot take. What could go wrong? It like it takes a little effort, but the output or the result on that is really big. But like, how do you example? How do you justify? I'm a designer. I have to work on a deadline, and because my boss learned about cloud design that can output designers faster, and I tell him that I need more time because I need to check all those things. But at the same time, I don't want to be seen as underperforming. How do I prepare to do this work? Do I deliver the work first fast, but adding the caveat that says, hey, I need more time because those are the things that are wrong here, or those are the things that I didn't check, but you ask for it, take it, or you just let it go? How do you, because you know you're going to do the work either ways,
Yeah.
but like, how do you position yourself and how do you prepare? Because sometimes people don't see with good eyes whoever pushes back.
Yes. And I can only speak from my own experience
Experience,
in the
yeah.
past. Like when, for example, I worked in a place that wasn't very interested in accessibility stuff. So I took my own private time away from my work to build a guide that no one asked for. And then I gave it to multiple teams who then proceeded to use it. Right. So sometimes, and this is just my opinion, you could take it or leave it. And you did not get this advice from me, is you ask for permission after that you start doing the things and then you ask for permission later. Because one thing you can start to do is, like I said, half an hour of someone's day to assess risk is not a big thing.
Okay.
When you start to, let's say, people in the past have asked me from very big companies, my company doesn't care about making things accessible. And then I said, don't use those words. Don't use the words accessible, but talk about how you can make these colors a little different.
Mm.
Maybe we could change the hue. Maybe we could make this more opaque. Maybe we could make this these fonts bigger. There are ways to talk about things, and asking a single question to me is not harmful. But what is having to do stress yourself out, having to do work that doesn't make sense. But
Okay.
you can always stop and ask a question.
I understand. You said something interesting there about do not use the words. I do find, this is my personal opinion, I do find my words like accessibility very academic. How do we humanize that? Because those are very important topics. And in my opinion, they use very big words to talk about fundamental things.
Yeah.
Like when we talk about accessibility, it feels like a dessert after I have the main meal, but that's not the case.
Yeah.
How can we humanize? Maybe it might be the language barrier thing because English is not my first language.
Yeah.
And when I try to do the translation that to Portuguese, it becomes even way more. unreachable thing, because we can like, what is in Portuguese? Acessível will be like accessibilidade, and the normal person would hear that and be like, what is even that?
Hmm.
Maybe we don't need that. Like, I feel like there is a need to humanize, saying, or even inclusivity. And when we say things like inclusive design, feels like, are you trying to bring everyone? But if you say, hey, what about your brother that is colorblind? What about that guy that can't write? What about the people that are intentionally or non-intentionally excluding? So, what are the ways we can use to humanize this discipline?
I'm going to do a few steps back because we're in Europe right now. And there is a thing called the European Accessibility Act
Okay.
that your designers should know about. If they
Okay.
don't, they should. And so if you are making products in Europe, if you are making products in the US, you need to know these words because there are regulations, laws, and guidelines around them. When I think about the words accessibility, inclusion, which in the United States have some, they become very politicized, for lack of a better word. It's an interesting time. When it comes to disability, people hear the word and their bias shows up, right? But disability is a group anyone could join at any time. And when you think about any product or service you use, from banking to the grocery store to just getting around on public transportation, you want to be able to do those things without friction. So when it comes to thinking about how to reword something or how to make something more open to people, think of reducing friction. How can I reduce someone's pain points for using my website? How can I make it so that it's easy for somebody to enter my building, right? I stubbed my toe the other day really badly. And I was like, oh no, is my toe broken? Am I going to have a hard time walking around? Can I get into take these steps to get to this place? So when places are accommodating to let people in with their strollers, with their canes, then it's a more welcoming experience. So if we think about you use social media and you're outside, but you're not with the speaker loud, right? You're probably seeing something with captions on it.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have that, that's making it less friction for you. That's also for somebody who's deaf or hard of hearing, they can also interact with it. So when it comes to making things more accessible and inclusive, just think about it as reducing friction is one perspective.
But there is a thing on the startup world where we say that accessibility and inclusivity is an afterthought because we don't even know that we're going to survive in the first place. Why should we care?
Because people care about money. And to me, whenever anyone says making something accessible is too much, do you know how much money you are leaving behind? Billions. There are, in the US, 1 in 4 people have disability.
Okay.
So when people tell me, oh, I'm not making something accessible because I don't have time for it, I say, okay, then you don't like making money.
I
That's
see.
how I see it.
Okay.
Okay, that's a choice.
Okay.
So I think if you really want to, the bottom line for most people, most companies is you want to make more money, you want to be able to grow. And in order to do that, more people need to be able to interact with your product. And if you make things more accessible to all sorts of people with different abilities, then you will. So if I have something that's only in English and I can translate it, that's limiting me to people who only speak English when there are 7,000 languages spoken on this planet.
I see.
So when I can make something that is more open for people, then Look at this, we're in the midst of the World Cup, which is one of the biggest sports in the world. And people have made the experience itself accessible for people who are even deafblind, right?
Okay.
There are people who will sit with their friends and sign in their hand so that they could experience the game too.
Nice.
There, within the stadiums, FIFA has invited all these folks with disabilities to make sure that they're making an inclusive experience for the game itself. So it exists. And to be frank, especially in the United States, because that's where I live, we have a very big aging population. And
I
frankly,
see.
so does Europe. So when people are young and they're making these products, they're not thinking about their older selves, right? And this is one of the workshops over the years that I've done that's been very successful within corporations and in my classrooms, like designing for your future self. Because people don't think of themselves as older. But when you start designing now for your older self, and anybody, any designer here who's watching this knows, you have relatives who you have become the IT support for, right? You are helping them with their technology. Why? Because it's not easy for them to use because of the design. Because when it was designed, it wasn't designed thinking about, oh, we need to make this font huge. Oh, we're going to use, like when people use 9, I'm going nuts. Like, what are you doing? You can't see these glasses that I'm wearing right now are bifocals. So if I'm reading, I could see bigger here.
Oh,
So because I need to, that's my eyes have changed. And as our bodies age, we change. And we need to build for that as designers.
I see. Like yeah, like I think like designing from your future self is like a very like interesting perspective, because like we know like we as people we are very selfish, and you say if you start telling people, oh, you have to take into account all the people, most gonna be like, yeah, we will. But if you say you should design for your future self, makes it like a self-interest
Yeah.
mission and change perspectives, and you're like,
Yes.
I want to be able to use this like 5 years down the
Yes.
line, so I better make it like properly done.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very interesting
And that's basically what my workshop over the years I've done is have you think about yourself as an older. Are you sitting all day? Does your back hurt? Are your knees hurting? Are you wearing glasses? Are you feeling issues with your hands? Like all that stuff. Because for me, when I started to think about like during the pandemic, I got really into virtual reality. And I thought, oh, I want to use this when I get old. Will I be able to? And then I started doing more like research into it. And I was like, oh, it's not that accessible for like older adults. Why not? And I did some work around it and research around it and I wrote about it. And but yeah, that's that like
that's
this, we should start thinking more about this.
I understand. So that's a very interesting perspective, very important thing to be taken into account. So coming back to the AI perspective, like we said, that the AI is basically making the decision. What is the role of the designers now? Like we're just editors?
No, we're not editors.
Okay.
I like to think of it, and I'll ask this to the designers who are listening, is what can you do that AI cannot?
Yeah, that's gonna be problematic.
You can say it's problematic, and that's your answer. But everyone who's listening to this has their own. And as an educator of future designers, I make sure my students know what they bring. Because what the rhetoric is, and that's persuasive talk for people who don't know what the word rhetoric is that AI is coming for you, it's coming for your job. But the entity that's coming for you and coming for your job can never admit it's wrong, is confident when it's wrong. That's what's coming for you, right? And as a human being with lived experience, nothing can beat that at all, in my opinion. So what can you do that AI can't is you can read a room. You can listen to a user talk about their experience and adjust your designs, right? You can really understand the why behind someone, AI cannot distinguish between a person screaming because they're getting murdered and a person screaming because they're having fun on a ride.
I see.
But a human can. And therefore, we need to understand that AI, as much as people talk about it, is simply a tool to be used by humans. It's not a replacement. It can't be. And frankly, the creativity, especially with designers, is what the world needs, right? And so I think it is something to think about. It's actually my newsletter that just came out is about what can I write that AI cannot, because I had a research assistant of mine read a chapter of a book that I was writing. And I was so proud of it. I was like, yes, I did this. And she read it. Then I said, what did you think? And she goes, it's good, but I could just learn this on ChatGPT. It was like a stab. I was so like, oh my God, she's not wrong. Okay. She was right. So then I started thinking about what stories can I bring
That
that AI cannot.
cannot, yeah.
So, for example, I went to Tulsa a few weeks ago, and in America, Tulsa is the home of a place where a horrific massacre occurred with Black people,
Okay.
one of the worst. And I took a tour of this neighborhood called Greenwood, and they used to call it Black Wall Street. The entire neighborhood burned, hundreds of businesses gone. During the tour, we were shown a storefront with bricks. The bricks were from 1921. They used those bricks to rebuild. I touched those bricks. For me as a Black American, it was significant to know that even though something was burned down, it was rebuilt and
Mm-hmm.
I got to touch it. AI could never.
I see.
It could never do what I did and feel what I felt. And that is what a designer has, and they can't forget that they have that. That's what makes our design special, that added touch. Yes, you could output something very quickly, and sure, it looks nice, but what does it make somebody feel? Because what we design makes somebody feel something. That's the output, right? Our input is doing our designs. The output is somebody feeling good
Good about it, yeah.
when they use this thing. And that to me is what designers need to go back to. AI is not thinking that, right? It's zeros and ones.
Oh, fantastic. That's a very important perspective. Made me think a lot. Okay, I think like we're approaching the end of this episode, and I would like to ask you one like hot take about AI. What is your, how can I say, what is one thing that is true about what's happening with the current landscape and how AI is affecting everyone that you believe is true, but most people don't?
Oh gosh. I do believe it's changing the way we work, right? Because you cannot have a single day where people do not talk about AI. I even hear people who work in coffee shops talking about it, right? This is something, it's not going away ever. However, I think the way that and what I'm seeing more of is the way that we work with it is in a systems way, and that designers need to understand systems better, the
Better.
systems they work within and the systems that they can build. And to remember that AI is a tool, because I think people forget that along the way. I think people see it as the end all be all. Some people, it's when you look at the design industry and what people are saying, there's like AI is the worst thing in the world. No one should use it. It's destroying the planet. It's doing all these things. Then there are people who are like, AI is the best thing in the world. Everybody needs to use it. And then there are the people who are just trying to make their way in the world. And they have to use it because that's what their job mandates. However, I think we could be more thoughtful in our use of it and remember that it is a tool. So I don't know if I totally answered your question, but I hope
Yes,
I did.
yes, you did. I think this. I think to close, I would like to ask you to give advice, like some practical takeaway that you think designers should do, pay attention to going forward, because you think that's important or is related to the next shift. And second, I would like to you to tell where people can learn about your books and where can people find you.
Yeah, sure. So I think as designers, one of the thing that happens, especially when people get in jobs where they become very comfortable, is they stop learning.
Okay.
And I think that you should not stop learning. I think you should keep up on what's going on, whether it be like I love Sidebar. I get the newsletter and I get to read articles of what's going on, looking at UX Collective and reading what's happening, right? Because not everybody likes to go to, you have a wonderful meetup. And if you can go to meetups, go to those. But if you are not a social person, check out Reddit. But I do think it's important to keep up, especially with AI and what's going on. And then how do people get a hold of me? Or I'm on LinkedIn. So I'm very active there on LinkedIn. And if you want to know more, you can look at my website, reginegilbert.com. And I'm pretty Googleable, I think. So find me.
Yeah, you're famous.
I am not famous. I am known. I'm not famous, but thank you.
Yeah. So thank you, Regina, for accepting this invite and being part of this episode. And for those watching, thanks for being to this long. Hopefully, we'll be able to bring more incredible guests for the next episodes during this summer. See you next time.
Thank you, everybody.